Welcome back everyone, and it's time to go balls deep! Today I am covering a very special story, an alternative ending to Attack on Titan's manga, and I must say, you know what I'm gonna say, it's fire! The artwork and story absolutely slaps. Seriously, stick around to the end of this video because your mind is going to be blown with how this turned out, and we should support this project going forward. Look, there's no way to deny the criticisms the community had regarding the final chapters. This is an ongoing debate that will last for a lifetime.
Marge, I'm confused. Is this a happy ending or a sad ending?
It's an ending, that's enough.
We explained our gripes with the finale in the two videos being displayed to you right now, where we covered in great detail the concerns we all had within our community with how things were represented and unfolded. Attack on Titan AnR Requiem is an alternative ending where it's an interpretation of where the story should have ended, in their opinion of course, which we all know having an opinion is blasphemy on the internet. Now, before a war breaks out and people argue in the comment section that this alternative story shouldn't be created as it's disrespectful, well, it's already been debunked that Isayama himself stated he appreciates manga created by fans and he supports the idea of them doing so. As we all know, the creator of Attack on Titan mentioned after its conclusion that he felt like the ending had its faults, where it was beyond his writing capability to correctly portray its theme and message. Isayama even mentioned how the original ending he intended was changed due to the popularity of the show, so he felt responsible of what he wants to represent to the people with his characters. On top of that, we know his editor influenced his drafts by changing them. Some people would argue that fans that are criticizing the ending he wrote are not really true fans at all. Now with this, there came a lot of criticism, feeling as though everyone should accept Isayama's ending to his own story. However, this brings us to the death of the author concept. The concept revolves around the idea on how an author's intentions should hold no weight when coming to an interpretation of their writing, having the logic that books are meant to be read and not written, and so the ways readers interpret them are more important and real than the ways writers write them. When we come to Attack on Titan, we as the audience came to a common understanding of what made sense and which direction the story was heading. To expect an ending aligned with such understanding is reasonable. This in no way is disrespectful to Isayama. In fact, it could be seen as the most respectful thing someone can do for this series, and everyone realistically wishes him only good health and wishes for his future. Writers at the end of the day are humans. They have human problems and go through human setbacks. Isayama's journey with writing Attack on Titan wasn't perfect. Let's not forget what happened to the deputy editor. These events in life can easily sway a person's intention when writing out a story. We don't know for certain why Isayama chose to end Attack on Titan the way he did, but we know for sure that a lot of things didn't cohesively add up, which brings us to Attack on Titan AnR Requiem, a community project to help give Isayama's story the ending it deserved. This manga continues from chapter 136 with Armin being taken into the realm of the paths where he meets Zeke Yeager. Now I am going to play parts of the story for you that were voiced by Dylan and his team, and after each section I will be explaining step by step why this version of the ending is what we believe to be the original ending Isayama had in mind before it was totally scrapped. So imagine that this is chapter 137 onwards.
Mikasa?
Long, long ago, when our world was still young, and all manner of unknown things began to form, that which we call life was born. Throughout the span of time, life began to evolve, and as the conditions changed and became more complex, life sought out more than survival. It sought meaning. We as a species became arrogant in our conquests, thinking ourselves to be special, simply because of our ability to thrive and till the world to our design. And yet, in spite of all odds, one such ancient life form persisted through millennia. Refusing to pass on, it waited. Why? For what purpose? Perhaps it too was waiting for another chance to fight that inevitable doom waiting for us all. Or maybe, in its need to fulfill that instinct to persevere, by pure chance, it found a way. Or maybe, there really is no deeper meaning to any of this after all. And all these years of suffering have all been for nothing. Well, regardless of how or why, our history began because one pitiful slave girl defied her master and stumbled into the power that changed everything. Yes, Eren's friend. That little girl was her. In her desire to find meaning, she was pushed to survive, and thus she became our founder, Ymir. I cannot pretend to understand it all, even after spending all this time here. But one thing is for certain. No matter how one may try to fight it, death is inevitable. So, why bother seeking out something as arbitrary as meaning at all? All these lives that never needed to suffer. All these paths created from arrogance and the desire to defy the very nature of this world. If she had just accepted her fate and freed herself from her suffering, as we all eventually do, perhaps all this could have been avoided. Maybe then we might have been spared from this existence. This place was born of that arrogance. Unable to move on from the will of the king, she was banished here, to this place free from death, obeying his desires, godlike in power, but forever a slave. With this earth, she creates the monsters that destroy and perpetuate the cycle of suffering.
So, this all began because of her. And this is the place free of death? But if she has all this power, why not use it to free herself?
So you've realized the conundrum. Very good. I have spent an astounding amount of time here trying to answer that question. Why didn't she exact her revenge on the man and people who enslaved her instead of serving them?
Maybe she couldn't. Some kind of condition to her power.
I too came to that initial conclusion. However, the more I watched this history, the less I was convinced that was the case. The power itself was not the issue. So could it have been her will? Was she incapable of separating her own desires from that of her abusers? Or was there some hidden need to belong? Was that her meaning? If so, then her suffering truly was great. In the end, Eren was able to understand her when I couldn't. That's why she went with him. He offered her something no one else could give her, and that was freedom.
The way this chapter starts in contrast with Isayama's story, it totally sets the goal of fulfilling all the loose ends of the story. The chapter is titled To You 2000 Years at Last. Now this is a reference to the first Attack on Titan chapter titled To You 2000 Years From Now, as well as chapter 122 From You 2000 Years Ago, where in this case we see the message given to young Eren in chapter 1. We see future Eren communicating to the younger version of himself through the realm of the Path. The Path is a place that transcends time and has time travel. The team of AOT Requiem are clearly trying to complete the loop of the story to make sense of it all. In chapter 1, we see a child Eren dreaming at a tree where he begins to cry, claiming to have remembered Mikasa with longer hair and that the dream felt so real. This alternative version of the chapter has fixed the plot inconsistencies Isayama created by not connecting chapter 1 to anything and not addressing this plot device at all. Why would Eren in chapter 1 have that information? And why was that chapter titled A Message to You from 2000 Years? None of that was really addressed. However, this alternative ending by AOT Requiem fixes this issue. So Eren, looking like a right Chad, takes himself back in time, showing the history of the world, with the beginning of life and its progression throughout time until it sought purpose and true meaning, which by the way in our eyes is a brilliant plot device to explore, since this is something we as humans naturally want to understand as we mature, thus making another relatable message in the final chapters of Attack on Titan that would have thematically attached itself with the other themes perfectly. This separates us from other species, we being the only creatures to debate, philosophize, and contemplate on our own existence. Through the illustration, Zeke is also narrating his own interpretation of history to Armin, as Zeke has also been in the past for a very long time. Zeke elaborates how humans become arrogant, feeling special as they were able to mold the world to their imagination, allowing them to thrive amongst the rest. However, there was once an ancient life form that persisted to survive through millennia. This life form we know to be the hallucigenia, the worm. Zeke contemplates on the reason it strived for so long, but comes to no real conclusion, which would make sense as in the realm of the past, these guys can only witness the history through their ancestors along with the hallucigenia, but they won't be able to derive reason for their actions, where reason and intentions can only be explained by those committing the actions, right? We then move to the history of Ymir Fritz, and she stumbled into the power that changed everything. Now, a cool thing that was added is the way Zeke refers to Ymir. He says Eren's friend. Zeke lived in the realms for years and acknowledged that Eren understands her and they both are working together for the same goal. This isn't manipulation or the fact that either of them are being subjugated by the other, therefore not causing oppression to one another and treated as equals. This goes against the idea that Isayama represented in the final chapters, where one way or another Eren was oppressed by his drunk dream of chasing freedom, as Kenny puts it. Eren was Ymir's tool to cause a chain reaction to occur to get rid of her own curse. Rather, in Attack on Titan Requiem, Eren and Ymir are working together to achieve the same goals of freedom. We also see some consistency with Zeke's character as he analyzes Ymir's decision to strive for life. As Ymir was being chased for her life, she kept on running until she fell into a hole in the tree. Zeke makes a point that if she had submitted to death, which all life will succumb to eventually, then the suffering of the world with the Eldians being Titans could have been avoided. This is perfect writing for Zeke in our opinion, because his nihilism would surely build up due to his endless time in the paths, where he failed his own plan, made his parents die, and had to succumb to Eren. His whole life's hard work and plan was a mere failure, which is in line with his ideology of the euthanization plan. Zeke still believed in his idea that the Eldians shouldn't exist and the solution should have been the eventual extinction of their people, as they wouldn't be allowed to have children, which again is why Historia's subplot pregnancy was so important for the overall message of the story, as it gave her relevance as a counter to his ideology, along with making Eren's actions have more weight if he was involved in this pregnancy. So coming back to Zeke, he makes a point that if Ymir had just died, then he along with all the Eldian wouldn't have gone through the suffering they did. His euthanization plan wouldn't even be needed, and the world would be spared from Titans and their carnage. Zeke goes on to say how the Path Realm was born from the arrogance of surviving even after death. Ymir had godlike powers, yet she was forever a slave. Ymir not being able to move on from the will of the king, she was imprisoned to follow his desires through their descendants, using the realm to create the Titans, continuing on the perpetual cycle of suffering. This perfectly tied back to chapter 122, when Eren grabbed Ymir from the back, hugging her, saying how she was waiting for someone for 2,000 years to free her. The story doesn't deviate from Isayama's portrayal of Ymir's desire for belonging and having Stockholm Syndrome. However, this chapter made it much clearer of Ymir's mental subjugation. Her mind was broken. She was all alone with no one and nothing to return to but her captor. Zeke mentions if this was the case, then Ymir's suffering was truly great. This is a more clear understanding of Ymir being Stockholmed, because the message relayed to us is that she wasn't in love, rather she was just broken beyond normal reasoning. In Isayama's original ending, Ymir's confession of being in love with the king was not represented properly at all, as it retconned every interaction she had with Eren and the king himself, because she was always shown as sad and subjugated. All her life she was a slave, already being dependent on King Fritz. When she was let free to be hunted down, she probably felt like she deserved it. When she had access to power, Ymir chose to return to her abuser, feeling as though she will still have someone to return to, which she did. King Fritz granted her a life above her previous. She stayed by his side as his woman, bore him children, and for once was able to offer him something, this time out out of fear, she never attempted to follow her own will and desire, because the last time she did, which was freeing the pigs, shown in chapter 135 and chapter 122, it resulted in punishment and others judging her for what she seeks, freedom. Now, never wanting to feel that again, she subjugated herself to only follow the will of King Fritz and gave him everything that she possibly could with the power of the Titan. This act was ultimately due to her lack of self-worth, loneliness, and experience of being a slave from a young age. She never really had true freedom, and through the pigs, she explored that desire and received heavy backlash. Even after death, she feared following her own will, where she ended up living alone with memories of her future descendants, still being binded to King Fritz through this blood. Ymir needed one person to tell her that it's okay to let go, and finally decide to follow her own wishes for once, which again goes back to chapter 122, when Eren tells her that she is no slave and she is no god, she is just a person that doesn't need to serve anyone. This is an option that was never given to her, an option that she blocked out of her own mind due to her mental enslavement. She cried out for help to her descendant Zeke Yeager through the Attack Titan, and he had come to set her free. Attack on Titan Requiem has improved Ymir's story with this small addition. We don't even need to cover why this is a better idea of Ymir freaking falling in love with King Fritz. I mean, just saying that out loud should let you know how that causes a problem. Imagine being enslaved and forced to bear children and cannibalized, but supposedly was in love with that person the whole time. We already explored this in great detail with how this created a number of plot holes, especially if she lost the will and wanted to die in the first place by the spear, since the healing factor is connected to your will to live. How did she lose the will to live? If you want to understand the entire reason why the community believes the original ending was lackluster in this regard, please watch the video being displayed to you right now. It will be in the pinned comment. Now I'm gonna pass the video on to Yusuf as he will explore the other parts of AOT Requiem and more of the story.
So, is she finally free? Ymir, are we all free now?
Not yet.
But you showed her she's not alone anymore. If that's not enough, then what's she waiting for?
For 2,000 long years, she's been waiting for someone to free her, to free us all. It is for this reason you are here. This power has shown me the paths ahead, branches of things that have passed, what could have been, and what can't be changed. And the paths built on their plans that I reject, leaving only one. When you wake up, you'll forget what you learned, but not what you felt here. This will all feel just like a long dream, until that moment. Only then will you begin to understand. I have walked through these plains for what's felt like eternity. Like our brother, I tried to see and understand. Through the combined power of the Attack and Founding Titans, I learned to control what I saw, and I could see the results of all of their plans. I saw peace, but also endless destruction. Over and over and over again, with no end in sight. Seeing it, I knew I had to be the one to finish it. This never-ending cycle of hatred. But I also tried to save the ones dearest to me and change the flow of paths. At first, I tried to stop some things from happening, but I realized that to achieve that one goal, sacrifice was unavoidable. To destroy this ongoing cycle of hatred and achieve true freedom, I am prepared to sacrifice the world. So, Armin, I will keep moving forward until all my enemies are destroyed.
Okay, so coming back to the Attack on Titan Requiem chapter, we continue with Chad, Eren's interaction with his younger self, where Eren showcases how much time he has spent in this realm, striving for freedom, linking back to what he's offering Ymir by understanding her suffering, a role that others than Zeke cannot fulfill. This fantastically links to the scenery Eren mentioned to Zeke and his father to give him the Attack Titan in the first place, an iconic panel in chapter 121 where it was one of the driving points for Eren's character to keep pushing forwards. At this point, the younger Eren asks his adult self if they are all now free, thinking things are as simple as Ymir finding contentment with no longer being alone, and how Eren removed her chains back in chapter 131, giving back her free will. She also defied the royal bloodline within Zeke, which means she's no longer a slave to King Fritz, and finally has someone that understands her. However, his older self clarifies that won't be enough. Ymir purposely threw the Attack Titan, which represents the freedom she sought, was looking for the right person to help her be truly free. Eren himself even admitted that the power within the Attack Titan always strives for freedom one way or another, like a pushing force. This was also reinforced by Eren Kruger. Throughout time, the Attack Titan keeps moving forwards. Ymir has been waiting for 2,000 years for this person, and Eren happened to be the one. This is because Ymir herself identifies with Eren's desire for freedom by being born into this world. Things played out the way they did just so Eren could end up with the Founding Titan's power. This was also due to what Eren possessed, which was the fighting spirit to never be subjugated. We know Eren even before he was bestowed the power of the Titan, he was such a unique boy. Are we all forgetting that Eren didn't bat an eye when he killed Mikasa's captors? This isn't something a normal child can do. Eren saw oppression and risked his life to fight it. With the Titan power or without, Eren kind of always was a Chad. Even when we refer back to chapter 121, when Elder Eren witnesses the murder he commits with his brother, he states that if someone tries to take his freedom away, he won't hesitate to take theirs. And he has been like this since birth, which is the reason why Eren was chosen, or even fashioned for this very circumstance. This alternative ending fixes another plot hole Isayama created in the original. In Isayama's version of events, Mikasa was shooed in to become the chosen one by Ymir to end the curse that she has. This came off left field, where fans were bewildered as to how this could even be possible. Mikasa was the protagonist all along, where the story is in Eren's perspective. How does this even make any sense? It automatically retconned every interaction Eren had with Ymir in the most important chapters of the whole story, such as chapter 121, 122, 130 and 131. We then move on to another change by Attack on Titan No Requiem, which is the reason why Eren had to do the rumbling. Eren goes on to state how the combined power of the Founding and Attack Titan has shown him the paths ahead, branches of things that have passed, what could have been and what cannot be changed. These are the paths built upon the oppressor's plans, which Eren rejects, something he reiterated to the Eldian people at the end of chapter 123. Eren says, "My goal is to protect the people of Paradise who bore me and raised me, but the world desires the extinction of the people of Paradise. Over countless years, their hatred has grown beyond this island. They surely will not stop until they killed every subject of Ymir." Isayama's ending made this resolve and goal obsolete, where Attack on Titan No Requiem once again stays true to Eren's message, which in fact gives it more meaning as to why he came to the decision of doing the rumbling. Now, as Eren states his famous line, we see his speech reaching out to his father, Armin and Zeke. Eren says, "So Armin, I will keep moving forwards until my enemies are destroyed." As we saw in chapter 121, Eren showed specific memories to his father and Zeke. Being in total control of the powers, it would have allowed them to understand why he's taken this option. Furthermore, it has fixed another plot inconsistency from chapter 139, where Eren stated his mind was all a mush and his perception of time was all at once. If this truly was the case, he wouldn't have been able to act so cohesively in any of the chapters as soon as he kissed Historia's hand. Instead, his brain would have been like a vegetable. Regardless, now we understand why Eren did the rumbling, given that he didn't have much of a choice if he wanted to achieve any of his goals. Not doing the rumbling would mean that many themes will not complete their story arc. For example, the children abuse of becoming soldiers and not being taken out of the forest, continuing on a cycle of hatred and war. We can also mention how the sins of the father was not being surpassed by those that took the burden. The Titan curse continues on with the additional 8 pages that Isayama added. The prejudice against others for their their race or being in a different nation, also goes on with war breaking out by the means of revenge, which was a common theme explaining how this is involved in the cycle of hatred. However, in Isayama's chapter 139, we see a fascist society being created where Eren's actions were supported by everyone. These Yeagerists did not condone the mass murder Eren committed, rather they seemed like they were worshipping him. Also, the idea of children being forced to eat their parents and getting rid of the Titan power for good was also shifted with the idea of Eren's head growing another hallucinogenia under the tree he was buried at. The perpetual cycle they lived never really ended. Overall, in this version, Eren is shown to be more humanistic and therefore addressed Isayama's own insecurity on the idea of supporting Eren's actions, which he had whilst writing the story, where we all know how that turned out. Eren understood the desires of the world because he was able to see what they would do in the future. In every possibility, Eren wasn't just speaking out of his ass, rather he was just making an observation backed by evidence, which left him with only one path, the rumbling. Remember, in Isayama's cut in chapter 138, Eren displayed a version of the path to Mikasa where if they ended up together, Paradise would be destroyed and all their friends would die. So this alternative story is trying to address that the hundreds of other paths which are possibilities of a reality that Eren is trying to stop. Think about the proposal Doctor Strange made to Iron Man in Avengers Endgame, where he states that there was only one possibility for them to win against Thanos, therefore implying that certain events and sacrifices are needed to save the greater humanity. Looking back holistically, everyone in the community felt like Eren should have explained the paths and explored them since time was irrelevant in this dimension. Eren is living countless years in this realm with nothing better to do than observe the future possibilities and outcomes. We are shown Eren's perspective of how he has only one option to achieve true freedom and peace for all of the Eldian people and the Paradise nation. This gives Eren's character greater reasoning and benevolence above others, that he's doing the right thing for the sake of his people by putting in the effort to find other solutions rather than being a selfish person that didn't care about anyone else except himself. This also showcases his humanity, much like in chapter 131 when Eren broke down with Ramsay and Halil. Eren wanting to create another solution instead of doing the rumbling. In No Requiem, Eren states, "I saw peace but also endless destruction over and over and over again with no end in sight. At first, I tried to save the one dearest to me by trying to change the flow of paths. I even tried to stop some things from happening." Eren took initiation to find other solutions by learning of these other paths and options. However, then finding out it was all a failure that led to Paradise losing and his loved ones dying, meaning that the cycle of hatred and war will continue. So he then made the choice of doing the rumbling. This refers back to him stating that some people were necessary sacrifice for him to keep moving forwards, and when we witness his emotional tantrums that came out even against Hanj, if you guys can remember when he was in prison, Eren screamed for any other solutions or options for them to create, but realized that the truth was always in front of him. So again, everything that No Requiem is doing fixes a lot of plot inconsistency that Isayama did not address or mention towards the end, where fans were confused as to why his father would hand over the attack titan if he was against his plan in the first place, and then later was seen helping the scouts in the rumbling when Armin convinced them to fight. And a very cool thing about this version is that we can see how Eren interacted with these moments in time, as this also links back to Isayama's own writing where he showcased multiple paths and shards of history within chapter 130. As you all know, with the original writing of Isayama's final chapter, he never addressed these memory shards in regards to what they meant. Why did Eren refer back to them in chapter 130 if they meant nothing at all? We don't have a clear idea what they represented. However, in Attack on Titan No Requiem, we can clearly see these shards have meaning, where we witness Eren Kruger speaking to Grisha. However, Eren is present. This lets us know why Kruger knew about Mikasa and Armin, on top of explaining why Eren was speaking to himself in prison and other major events which his future self was influencing his actions to reach the goal in mind. This chapter then ends with Eren letting his child self know that he won't remember any of this until that fateful moment we see when he kissed Historia's hands, which again ties a lot of the loose ends. Regardless, the rumbling is still a moral dilemma. If you or I had omniscient future predicting powers and you knew suffering was inevitable unless you took a path which deemed you a monster and the sacrifice of many, would you take it? Put this into perspective. We're talking about your family and loved ones. They are going to die and you can clearly see it. Would you make a decision to save them and their future descendants over others? All of you must have heard the runaway train problem, where on a rail tracks ahead there are 5 people tied up and unable to move. The train is headed straight for them and you are standing right next to the train lever. If you pull this lever, the train will switch to a different set of tracks. However, you notice that there is one more person on the side track. So you have 2 options. Do nothing and allow the train to kill 5 people on the main track, or pull the lever, diverting the train onto the side track where it will kill 1 person. So what will you do? If you do nothing, 5 people are dead. But if you do something, you literally kill 1 person. Eren might have been in this situation. If he done nothing, his lack of action might have just caused more harm and disaster to the world. But his action of doing the rumbling might have in fact saved many with the life of a few. But anyway guys, that's it for this video. I hope you are enjoying the Attack on Titan No Requiem project. Myself, including Adul and pretty much everyone in the ABD team, really appreciate this alternative ending, and it's just mind-blowing how the fans can come together and create something like this. This takes a lot of time and effort, so please go and support them by clicking in the link in the pin section below, where you guys can be up to date and read the chapters along with us. But with that guys, we'll catch you lot next time.